Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Detour Live. As always, I'm joined by four-time national road champion John Trevor, Olympic gold medalist Scotty McGrory. Boys, what did you think of the Vuelta stage last night? Start with you, Iffy.
Well, I was a bit disappointed because when I was doing my tips earlier, I thought to myself, Wellens and Woods, they're always in the mix, but I never mentioned them, so I've got to wear that. But yeah,
it's another iffy story.
Another iffy story. But they've been two of the most aggressive and strongest in the breakaways. But yeah, it was a good looking breakaway. 7 riders, a lot of power in that. Stybar as well. So, they never got given a lot of leeway, but it was a very impressive small bunch ride for the whole stage.
Scoot, I don't know what the stats are, but in the last week of a Grand Tour this year, it's usually someone that's already won a stage or has clearly got good form.
Yeah, I think Dan's just frozen, I think, there, Johnny, hasn't he?
He has.
He has.
A frozen Dan.
He's right, though. He's right, though.
Sorry, we're not laughing. We're laughing at you, not with you. Sorry, laughing with you, not at you. Yeah.
Did my face freeze again?
Yes,
you did. You got to usually a rider that has good form, and then you froze.
Oh,
oh
no! I guess you keep talking. I'm going to move this Wi-Fi dongle. You keep talking, boys.
All right. Okay. Cool. Well, I'll answer what I think was the question. Was it's the usual suspects in the third week of a Grand Tour, and that this year in particular that has been the case, hasn't it, John? Because it's just simply the riders that have the legs. And we saw it at the Giro, and we've seen it here as well, that such difficult third week means the only guys capable of getting into the break are the strongest riders that aren't on GC, and that's what we've seen. That's why there's this consistency between the names. And also in that break yesterday was Dylan Van Baarle, who is the Jaco Herald Sun Tour winner overall. So that was great to see him do that last year and then go on to the mix. And he's the son. I was quite chuffed being the race director of that event, taking over from you, John, for the men's race last year, because I know his dad pretty well. He raced with his dad years ago, and he came out to Australia to do the Commonwealth Bank Classic and the TUI's Criterium Series up through New South Wales. I met him then, and he was a trackie. He was part of the Dutch track program, Team Pursuit, back in 1988 when I started my career. And so it was great to see his son come through and see him. I got a nice photo of him after the final stage, sent it to his dad. So we're all pretty chuffed with that.
Yeah. No, it was impressive ride by that group. It was a great race to watch because they started hitting each other in the last 12, 14K. It's actually Woods that started it all, and then he got on the wrong end of it and had to chase down the other three himself and drag the other two up just inside the last kilometre. He really actually stuffed that up. He probably could have won it, but anyway, he didn't though, did he?
No, he didn't. Well, Tim Wellens did say that he knew that he had to be at the front, and because he actually went pretty early, uphill finish. He actually went pretty early to the front, but then was just sort of balking all the way up. And then when he went for it, he had to be first into the last corner because basically the last corner was the finish. It wasn't like, you've got a chance to do anything after that. It was just bam, there was the line. So I think Woodsy probably just cooked himself a little bit in that chase to get back on. That's all it would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's what you would think. But where he really blew it was when they got well into the hill and Wellens attacked, he went bang onto Wellens' wheel. So he had Wellens covered. And then I'm trying to think who someone come underneath, sort of got level with them. Might have been, but anyway. And he sort of backed off. He let him in and dropped 3 back. So then when Wellens really went and opened up the gap, he's 4 back. So he had enough power to come all the way to him and then try to go around the wrong side anyway. So, he really did stuff it up. But whatever.
Yeah, Mark Soler, I think it was. It was a movie star, right?
Yes, that's right. It was.
That lost the wheel. Yeah.
There's only going to be, I read the interview with Roglic and they said, did you think about attacking or going for the stage? And he said, there's no time bonuses. So don't worry about it. It's when you're pretty confident with your legs. If you're like, I probably could have piped him, but saved myself. Today's stage looks filthy because I messaged George Bennett and said, hey, George, gave him a standard, 2 minutes notice to come on the show. And I said, come on, give us some insight. He said, nah, man. And, I said the other day he was hard to get from a level 2 excitement to a 3. He said they've been up since 7. Massive transfer to the start. He said it's 230 Ks of block headwind.
It's the longest stage, yeah.
Yeah. So what he did do, I said, look, just send us a video, mate. And he knows the rules, horizontal, but he sent me through a vertical video. But we'll take anything on this show. So this is George's update.
Morning, boys. Quick update. It's been, you can hear everyone going to sign on. Real early start, left in the dark. Long drive here. 230k stage, then a couple of 100k after the stage, so one of the worst stages of the Vuelta. The good news is it's a block headwind, so real excited for this one.
Well, he's probably only been partly, having a joke there, because a block headwind makes it easier to contain. Okay, hard for the brake to get up the road. That contains them in a way, and everyone notice they don't all feel like Eddie Merckx jumping up the road. So it does help you contain things. A block, it's like having an extra rider.
Yeah, and makes the riders that were wanting to attack perhaps a little less willing to go up the road because they know it's going to be, really, really tough day. Yeah.
All right, a few comments come in. Of course, Wendy Superfan. Hi, guys. Hi, Wendy. Samantha always got good comments on Devoed peeps. Eurosport is exiting the Aussie market by 7th of December. Most people, they weren't really showing cycling because you couldn't get Eurosport on Foxtel, I don't think, for a while now this year. So the only way you could watch it was through the GCN app. So is that still going to continue, or what's the go?
That will. So what happened was whatever the back behind the doors arrangement was with Foxtel, that fell over last year, and then Eurosport went on to Fetch TV. So you can still watch it in Australia, but you had to get the Fetch TV set-top box. So I didn't bother doing that because then the GCN app turned up, so GCN Race Pass. So I've just been I just registered with that because it's actually, to be honest, I've got no allegiance with them whatsoever, but it's quite affordable. It's still, you have to pay for it. It's not free to air, which would be better. But if Eurosport are leaving, then hopefully, haven't heard anything about it, but the GC Race Pass app will still work because they are working in conjunction with Eurosport. So they're sharing resources to broadcast cycling across both platforms, which is in Europe. You can either watch it on Eurosport or you can then catch up on it on their their Eurosport player, which is their app that they use. Whereas, we just use it out here as the GCN Race Pass, except for the races that SBS have the exclusive rights to, which is Tour de France, Paris-Roubaix. Not sure if there's others, but those two in particular, when SBS is broadcasting those, no one else can broadcast them, so you can't see those on GCN.
Geez, it'd be good if SBS had just a blanket license for the whole year and you could get all races for free. Hey, I had a comment the other day from the old man, and he said, ask the boys about the latest crop of riders coming through, which is a good point. You look at all the other sports, right? Particularly in Australia, AFL, they put a lot of money into junior development and, Auskick and all these sort of things. Where's cycling in Australia at in terms of developing the next young crop? And if there isn't enough resources in that, have we sort of seen the best bunch come through, and are we in for a bit of a drought moving forward? Scotty?
There's a couple of answers to this because we're always developing the next group. So you've got a couple of different platforms. In the past, it was simply so the AIS, or Cycling Australia's connection, or the high performance program, which originally was called the Institute of Sport. They would grab the best riders that they could see in both the road and the track and put them into the national AIS program and develop them that way. Robbie McEwen, Hank Vogel's, there's a plethora of them. Baden Cook, there's myself. There's so many riders that came through those programs. Then the national program had an under-23 team, dedicated under-23 team, which was then eventually connected, as you know, Dan, through Mitchelton Scott. And then that unfortunately fell over as well, which was basically Cycling Australia lost some funding, so they couldn't keep assisting the funding of that particular team. Then Jerry Ryan stepped up again to keep that going for another couple of years until now. Unfortunately, the last couple of years that has gone. So Cycling Australia as an organisation, which is now called Oz Cycling, as everything's come together with mountain bike and BMX, they still run a national program, obviously for the track riders, and that is one way still to develop riders into the next group because they still get exposure racing throughout Europe. They're also developing another group just behind that, a podium potential group with riders that are targeting the next Olympic Games after the ones that are coming up now. Now, that's all track specific, but a lot of those, Rowan Dennis, there's Cameron Meyer, there's so many of those riders, Luke Durbridge, that came through that program and then went into the pros later on. Then you've got some of the National Road Series teams. So Team Bridge Lane has been prolific with developing riders through our domestic scene, taking them to Europe for some races as well through the Asian racing program. So that's another little way of going through and developing them. But we don't have, I guess, that where we're lacking is actually a national funded, say, under 23 men's team like we had in the past. There's a bit of a hole that's been left with the departure of that particular team. And that sort of also goes for the women's program. The women had also a program that was sitting just below, so the Mitchelton Scott professional team, that was funded in conjunction with and assisted by Cycling Australia. And unfortunately, that fell over a couple of years as well. So we are a little bit behind in terms of development.
Yeah.
Has that been an issue, Iffy?
Yeah, it is an issue.
Yes.
Your dad's dead right. There is going to be a gap. We are going to have a sort of a year or so catch up before we can start developing any sort of junior program. I know that the new Oz Cycle do plan to work with some partners to get that going, but it is the major challenge for domestic cycling to develop a really good junior program.
Now, one of the things that is different now, though, is compared to if you go back 10 or 15 years, well, maybe probably 15 years or so, is that so many of the riders coming through now, they understand and they do train with power meters. So all of their power outputs, power to weight ratios, watts per kilogram, all of that is monitored. So if you get a reasonable result, and if you're in, say, a National Road Series team and you've got a good, administration and some coaching within that program, they can then identify that you are talented. Without having to go away and do any other races, they can then, if they've got the good connections, talk to teams, hey, look out for this guy, send the data to some of the World Tour teams or the Pro Continental teams, and just show, you can actually now show on paper that we have someone that really has the potential of a Richie Port or a Cadell Evans, or we've got this young kid coming through, have a look out for them. And when they do go to a bigger race, whether it's the Tour Down Under in the national team or Jake Herald's Sun Tour, that first sort of maybe top 10 result they may get may also have a little bit of extra kick to it because some of the teams may have already seen some of their power data and they're already looking out for them. So there is still a way of identifying these young riders coming through without them being in a team based in Europe.
Isn't a big key if you've got to capitalise on the real young kids. Like when Cadell won the Tour de France, you saw Fed Square packed out, young kids wearing yellow jerseys, and suddenly you're looking around going, wow, cycling's like cool, If they aren't doing something to really get into the schools, like there's a lot of stories of kids being identified at these talent programs. That, of course, needs funding and money. If they're not going to really dial that side of things up, it's really going to struggle in sort of that 10 to 15 year mark.
Exactly. It was funny. While I was listening to Scotty, then he was saying that about these talent identifications with all of the, in the old days, they started winning bike races, and you noticed them as well. So that's another way of doing it. Yeah. But look, when I was a youngster, I used to have the Australian Schoolboys Championships, and they were as an under 14 and under 16 Victorian Schoolboys Championships, which were really huge and become a national series. It was right from back in the early 60s, and that was a fantastic entree onto a bike for lots of people. I remember Crackers Keenan being on the front page of the Herald Sun with my mate Robbie Lobb, the tallest and the shortest guy in the Victorian Schoolboys final. But it was a wonderful every school would have their school heats, and you have to place in your school heat, and you go into a zone final and then win a zone final and get down to Melbourne for the state final. And if you got into the 3 in the state final, then you would go and represent us in the Australian Schoolboys Championship, which were fantastic.
You know what the key
could, John? Sorry, Ben.
Sorry, mate.
You represented, didn't you? Didn't you? You went pretty well in the schoolboys back then.
No, could never even make the never ever made the grand final, the Victorian final. I would always get beaten in the zone final by Alan Love and Daryl Damate. Daryl Damate, who's Rana's uncle, actually. So it's Alan Love from Leongatha would win. And he would also win the state title, and I think he won the Australian schoolboys, or second in the Australian schoolboys. Daryl Damate ran second in the. So what would happen? You had to win the zone final to go in, and then all the losers from different zones would ride in a ripper charge, and only the winner of that would go through. And then Daryl would beat me in that one; he would go through. So I never ever even rode in the Victorian schoolboys final, and I used to say I could be the third best. Under 16 in Australia, but I can't get past these two blokes.
you know what they got to do, Scooter? It's Zwift. I think like kids love games and make it fun and interactive, and just do school championships through Zwift. That'd go off.
Yeah,
definitely. Great idea, actually.
Well, there was a
about time you had one, Dan.
Well, I'm just thinking I shouldn't have bloody said on this show. Now all these people are watching, they're going to go off, and there'll be this Zwift championships, and someone will be licking $50 notes, and yeah.
Oh, don't worry, no, it is happening.
Nah, it's already it'll already be happening.
Yeah, the Canyon Tramp team picked up a couple of riders through Zwift, so they had one that was basically just from Zwift itself, and then they ran competitions for the through I don't know, Zwift Academy or something, and they picked up another one, young Queenslander. Name escapes me now. So they picked up a couple of riders by identifying them, or in terms of the Queenslander, she was already riding well in the National Road Series. So it was just proving that she was good enough and went through to go into the pro ranks. Hasn't happened for the guys yet. The only downside to the Zwift
weight
racing,
doping.
Well, weight doping is certainly that happens in Zwift racing, but it's the skills. So if you were new to the sport and you start just by doing online racing through Zwift or any of the other platforms, you're not getting the skills that you need to be competitive or at least safe in a peloton. So that is a challenge. And I've heard several stories before COVID of riders that were getting really, really good via Zwift and then coming out and riding some local criteriums and just not being able to get around a corner. So they're strong. They've proved that by doing so much Zwift racing, but they just don't have the skills.
Weren't you saying how they're going to look at bringing it into the Olympics at some point? Like
it'll come in.
So then maybe just say to yourself, no, I'm a Zwift rider. Like that's my skill set. I'll kill it in the kitchen. Like, you know. There's a good point. Someone said only downside is I think it's meant to be bloody power meter costs an arm and a leg. Yeah, but maybe it can be a private school championships.
There are different variations of power meters, but you're correct. And if you look at the latest SRAM group set that's out, I think effectively it comes with a power meter built in, and Shimano have their own version as well. So it's becoming one of the things that, if you want to be competitive, you want to race. So I've got two road bikes, both have power meters on them, and I have never connected them to my computer. Right, because I do not need to know how much power I've lost over
You don't
years.
want to know, yeah.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. But I've got them, but that's only because of my connections in the industry. That's why they're on the bikes. I don't need them. It's silly. But if you are trying to be competitive, race National Road Series, National Championships, that level,
you need it.
That's the way you train now. It's through power, so you have to have it.
Tomo wants to know, JT has a classic jersey on today, but who are the jerseys behind Scott today? Cav, Mick Rogers. What do you got?
Yes to all of that. And I want to hear John talk about why he's wearing that jersey as well. So the HTC, that would have been with you, Dan, I think. Were you with me? Were we together there at the Tour de France when I went and got that? So when it was the year that Kim Kirschen from HTC was leading the Tour de France. So I went in, two things I did. I took a yellow jersey and I went to, there were several, maybe 6 or 7 leaders of the tour that year, and I wanted each one of those riders that had led the tour to sign my yellow jersey, and then I was leaving one space at the top for the overall actual winner at the very end. So I thought that was going to be pretty cool. And I went to the HTC bus and got one of my mates to get all of the team to sign that HTC jersey, which has got Cav on it as well. And I gave him the yellow jersey and said, look, can you also get Kim Kirschen to sign this for me? And he came out with signatures from the entire HTC team on my yellow jersey as well as this HTC. And I could
Don't
not
you
have been
hate that?
more disappointed
You flat. I remember.
to have the signatures of this really strong team, but he just ruined my concept of having just the yellow jersey winners. I think I threw the jersey out. I don't think I still have it. I think I just
Why
tossed it.
yellow out, mate? Just got some yellow out.
I should have. Yeah.
The Wheel Wizard, stick Zwift, you two guys. As race organisers, will come the day the police will. You don't need to be on the road to use Zwift. There is a UCI Zwift Worlds in December.
Yeah, there is. And look, and the very first British Championship. Do you remember this one? This was late last year, I think. The first British Championship they had. The winner was disqualified for virtual doping.
Weight doping.
Well, it was virtual doping because there's a particular bike. If you ride it enough, you get all these little power-ups and all these other bonuses. And there's one bike you get, which is called a Tron bike from the movie Tron. And that gives you more power in the game. But you have to do, I don't know how many thousands of kilometres to then unlock this bike. So he rigged it somehow so that his bike would just register so many more kilometres so he could get this Tron bike to go into the British Championships, which he won on, but he hadn't legitimately earned the Tron bike to race on it.
And he was 115 kilo, I heard.
Could have been. Racing under 65.
What about riding an e-bike?
No, good mate. We could do that, but not in a race, no. You can't. And that would be part of it as well.
The funniest was when Stewie was over at the tour and he was doing tour groups, and he had this lady in his group who was breaking all the records on Strava with her e-bike, and she was like getting real pissed off some day. She's going, got nutted on this famous climb by like 2 seconds, and Stewie's like, "You're cheating! Like you're on an e-bike! Like what are you doing?" Yeah. Must go on all the time.
But see, Strava's another one, right? Where people they live in the virtual world of Strava, which also has detracted from joining a club and racing because you don't need to if all you want to do is actually compete against other people online, either as Zwift or actually out on the road with Strava. Then you can basically race against people on that segment. Go for it, come home, see how fast you went. I almost got that Strava Com, the KOM. I'll go and do it again tomorrow. And that becomes their competition, which traditionally, as you get better, you go and join a club and you start racing. But they take it so seriously. And they've actually added an element now that you've got the choice, and most people don't do this, but if you're in a race and when you upload your data, you can click the box to say, I was in a race, I wasn't just on a ride. And then it separates the Strava segment times from the normal people that aren't in a race compared to the ones that have come through in the peloton. And people that have those Strava times, the top ones that aren't racers, they crack it. They really crack the sads if a race comes through and takes all their Strava comps. I'm like, guys, if you're that competitive, join a club and get into some real racing.
Well, I think the future of Zwift and the like will be working with the sport, not as a separate thing. I mean, it's great. It's a great. Well, I think it's a fantastic idea that you come up with, Dan, for the schools championship, and there could be ways of learning, areas, bikes that would go around that school and then go to another area. There's ways of doing all of these things, but they've got to work hand in hand to develop the talent, but also to get people onto bikes and racing, because you can just say whatever you like. It'd be wonderful to do Zwift and go all the way, but it's not like riding a bike out on the road. There is something special about racing a bike in a bike race. It is not replaceable by Zwift.
Caroline had a comment, Strava, I've heard of people that go out on really windy days to get KOMs.
Absolutely.
I tell you, I had to. We went into, because I'm up in the Gambia still. We went into Seymour Butts and Seymour, a bit of everything down there, and did some shopping or whatever. And I said to Kay, as I took the bike, so I'm riding back. That's only 26k or something back, but a roaring tailwind, and boy, I felt good. I was bopping along. I did have a bit of a challenge as I got near Mitchelton, as the end of Northwood Road, turned right around Mitchelton, and I had on my right hand side this big fella who started matching me. We were going side by side. I had a tailwind, so I was matching him. And then he tried to burst through the fence. It was a kangaroo, but he tried to burst through the fence, got his head stuck, back out, caught me again, got past me, dived through, and he finally got across the road, jumped in front of me and whatever. He was hopping along. I reckon we were doing about 35.
Good on you, John.
Did I ever tell you about the time that we had a kangaroo jump our bunch?
No.
True. And if I wasn't there, I would not believe the story. But I was in just a local bunch in Bendigo. I was on the front, on the outside. On the inside of the road, on the right-hand side at the front of the bunch. And there were 3 kangaroos on the right-hand side going down the same direction as us. And we've all sort of panicked, we're kangaroos, right, as everyone yells out. And the 2 guys directly behind us on the front just backed off a little bit to get a bit of a gap. And then the mother kangaroo went left and went straight across the road. One of her juveniles went with her, and then the other one stayed. And then we've then crept past it, and we're still going, probably 25 k's an hour. I'm sort of talking to the roo, saying, right, just stay there. We'll be past soon.
Crocs Dundee.
Yeah. He said, no worries, Scotty.
no worries, bud. And then, of course, he didn't. So he just turned left and, desperate to try and get back with his family, he or she came straight across the road. And then I remember hearing it just like really push down on the road and jump just behind me. And the 2 riders behind ducked, and one got clipped on the helmet by the legs as he went over the top. Didn't fall off, but just clipped his helmet, jumped over the bunch.
What about that story Phil Liggett tells of his mate who was on a mountain bike ride, Scotty, against the lion?
Do you want to tell it? Do you remember it?
You can.
So so South Africa, what's Phil say, Johnny? There's we go into his property and then there's not another fence for 1,000 k's or something.
Yeah, his property backs onto Kruger National Park.
So it's wild animals everywhere, and his neighbour was getting into bikes a little bit, and Phil said, I wouldn't mind having a ride. And they were talking about making a bit of a circuit somewhere near there on the mountain bikes. Anyway, Phil went back to Europe to commentate on something. Next time he came back to South Africa, went and spoke to his neighbour and asked him about, did you end up going for a ride or not? And he said, yeah, I did. Now, the neighbour had been involved a bit with, hunting and all that stuff. He sort of knew a bit more about wild animals and how to act around them. And he said he went for this ride, but after a little while, he just sensed that there was something behind him. And he's looked over his shoulder, and there was a lioness just in full gallop coming at him. And instead of panic, and he didn't panic, he said he stopped, jumped off his mountain bike, put it up in the air. At first, as he's coming at him, he threw the bottle at him. So he took the bottle, threw the bottle at the lion, and the lion's just sort of going for it and dodged the bottle, just keeps coming. Stopped, put the bike up in the air over his head, and the lion just stopped, looked at him, and thought, the prey's never stopped. Prey just keeps going. You keep going until you catch it. So the prey stopped, it tried to get bigger, and then just walked away and got disinterested.
Yeah, unbelievable. So if you ever get chased by a lion,
the lion got disqualified for taking a bid in the last 10 kilometres as well.
Possibly.
All right, Iffy, time for Mitchelton Wines. Have you got your notes? You prepared?
Of course. I'm a professional, mate.
Oh, yeah.
There it is. Mitchelton, one of Australia's favourite wineries and a place of escape. But watch out for the kangaroos. Experience the history, the beauty and the serenity of the Goulburn Valley at your own pace. Looking over the vineyards from the iconic tower, staying at the new hotel, relaxing by that beautiful pool, recharging in the day spa, exploring the seasonal menu at the Muse, stopping by the Providore, touring the cellars, and of course tasting their signature wines. It's becoming a hugely popular venue for weddings and major functions, and there's the happy couple there and the almost happy couple there. And of course then you go downstairs to the Aboriginal Art Gallery, which is world class, just amazing, some magnificent works of art, one in there valued at $2 million, and this one's getting close. This is the $10,000 Toyota Land Cruiser with a $1.5 million paint job.
Will it get to 2 million by the end of the tourist day?
It could very well.
It could. Well. All right, here's a quick word from our great mates at Bike Exchange.
Look at this bike. You think it's just a bike, right? But it's not. It's a bike 374 people are looking at. This guy, this girl, them, all looking at it. People from here, there, and wherever this is. People that are looking for a bike. Or just a piece of it. Amateurs. Semi-amateurs. and pro amateurs. This guy wants this bike, but with this crank and these bars. This could be the perfect match. But not this one. This girl has a bike to sell, and thousands of people might purchase it. Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. His, hers, yours, and the latest data and insights help those businesses keep moving. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, with over 500,000 products and 900 brands, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
Great stuff. Never gets old, that ad. One thing I want to talk to you about, boys, I saw on Cycling News, Johan Alfredo forced into retirement after 33 years of age. Now, he did a pretty raw and open interview with, I think it was L'Equipe. He was talking about how he just didn't want to accept, and we've talked about this a bit with the 100 riders, out of contract. And he was saying that, he didn't want to write like a retirement note to the fans because he was still in denial. And then he's quote here, I used to hear people talk about the small death when a rider retires. But for me, that was abstract. When you're racing, you have to have your head in the handlebars and blinkers on. I like to talk things through, but I don't have many people to do that with. I don't necessarily have many friendships with other riders. And then he talks about the black dog in the bunch, Peter Kenner and Marcel Kittel stopped because of depression. But that is still a word that is taboo. Most riders don't express themselves or they hide behind appearances. Me, when I wake up in the morning, I'm sad not to be in touch with my emotions. I just need to rediscover an objective in life. This is obviously a bit of a concern for a lot of cyclists, coming up to this period where they don't have a contract. And unfortunately, a lot of them, they won't have a contract next year. I mean, that's just a fact. And it must be even harder for the guys, like the Aussie guys, that are in Europe, like your Jay McCarthy's that is recovering from an injury at the moment, Scotty. That transition when you are told, that's it, that must be an extremely difficult period to go through.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it goes for all sports people because one of the things you lose is just your sense of identity. You've been known as an athlete in whatever particular field for so long, and your focus has been solely for that. And unless you're well planned and well guided and mentored, you may not necessarily be ready for that next step. Whether you've choosing to retire at the end of the year or in a situation where the pros that are out of contract don't get re-signed, it can be slightly different scenarios, but there is the possibility that you could still end up in the same spot, not really understanding where you sit in the world. And I know in terms of the men's peloton, a lot of the riders don't go and complete tertiary education or anything like that. And sometimes those that do, by the time they stop racing, feel so far removed from whatever degree or whatever education that they did undertake years earlier that they feel like they're disconnected from that and they need to start afresh or start new. And it's really challenging for a lot of athletes in that regard. So one of the things I've always been, I guess, somewhat critical of maybe say not so much the teams themselves, but some of the national federations for anyone that's been sort of lifetime athlete is the well-being of those athletes as they approach retirement and then in a couple of years after, just to have the possibility of getting some kind of assistance and guidance through that next level. Now in Australia, the AFL, they do a very good program for those players, but they also have a massive budget, so they can afford to employ people to do it. Most federations, Olympic federations and pro teams don't have the budget to have people specifically in those roles to look after the athletes once they've moved on. And that is a big challenge. And we're a lot more comfortable now about talking about mental health, but our sport in particular is a fair way behind in that regard. I think everyone's aware of it, but they just don't know how to actually address it.
Well, this is an example of a rider that you talk to a few of the other ones. They've got support network because they do communicate with other riders in their team and they're social and all this sort of stuff. But if you're a bit of an introvert and you are struggling a bit, they always say, problem shared is a problem halved. Maybe there's an opportunity to create, even if it's an online support network and just for cycling, where it's riders that have retired that can pass on advice, or just a go-to spot for these guys that they can ask questions, there's a network where you can talk to people that have been through it, instead of always looking for. There's an issue. It's always been an issue for a long time. I remember flagging this in 2012 when I was at Green Edge, saying to guys like Bennett, hey, I think there needs to be a little bit more support here for mental health side of the sport. Maybe it should take the lead and create that online support network. It could be simple, like a closed Facebook group or something. It's a
great idea. Look, I read that story as well, Dan, and it was quite a touching story. But what pops out there is he's one of the few who it's even though he's 33, it's injury that's caused this. He would he had to have a graft. His injury didn't heal. They've had a graft, and he hasn't been able to come back the same way. So it's forced him out, and he just hadn't prepared for it at all. Because if your form's just gradually going, you're getting too old, and you see the writing on the wall. Most people do, and you might want to retire, but look, I've got to go. But when it's like this poor bugger, he wasn't ready to at all. So he's having real troubles about it. Look, he said he wanted to write a piece to everyone, to his team, to his riders, to say goodbye. He couldn't do it.
Yeah,
I totally understand where he's at. I have friends as well that had that brick wall where they had to retire from injury, and then did struggle afterwards. And look, a lot of the riders aren't. They're not even just financially prepared. They haven't made enough money to just say, okay, you know what, I can just relax now and start a cafe or a business or whatever, or not even that for a few years. There's not as much money in cycling as people may think, and at the lower levels, and especially with the women's peloton, there isn't. So, a lot of them really do sort of flap around and struggle afterwards mentally, and that is something that we absolutely must start to address better.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Before we wrap things up, I want to ask you, John and Scotty, it's probably a good time to be doing some sort of report card on some of these teams this year. Obviously, Mitchell and Scott, we've got allegiance there and we want them to do well. But if you look at how they've performed at this Vuelta, and obviously they had the yellow jersey at the Tour, where do you think they're at in terms of what they're going to go for next year? The only concern I've got is, I think when we're talking to White, is putting a lot of eggs into the bling basket. I don't know how that's going to go in terms of if
you're frozen again, Dan. Perfect timing to freeze. I got a suggestion about this. Why don't we? I think that's a really good idea. Why don't we look at the over tomorrow, Scotty and I will look at the 22 World Tour teams, and we'll give them a rating out of 10. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah,
and we'll do it for tomorrow night. But I think now that you brought up Mitchell and Scott, it's an interesting one because Tour de France, okay, they got that they changed their plan with the yellow jersey, and so they give them a higher mark. The Giro, you can't really even give them a mark because they never really got a chance. We don't know what happened there, and I really do reckon that Simon Yates would have given it without any of the issues. He was rightly an equal favourite with G to take that event out. His form just before was brilliant. So we'll never know where he got the COVID, how that affected him. But I know that the people in the team really believe that Simon will win a Grand Tour. Will win another Grand. He's already won one. They really believe he will win another Grand Tour. It's more likely to be a Giro or a Vuelta. I can't see him winning a Tour de France, but they do believe he'll win another Grand Tour. And why not? He's a brilliant bike rider.
Well, once you've won a Grand Tour, you're always going to think you could win another one, but a lot of people have only won one, isn't they? So it's only time will tell.
Well, that's right. But he almost won another one. He looked to have that Giro in the bag as well.
Yeah,
blew that one away. But he was brilliant in that Giro. The Giro he blew up in till the day before he blew up. It was amazing. It was just riding away from people. It was a fantastic ride. So he is a very, very talented. Both of them are very talented guys, the Yates.
Absolutely.
Be interested in what happened more with his brother, what role he's going to have at Ineos.
Do you reckon he's going to be a worker, or will they give him a chance?
Well, the good thing is with these guys these days, there's 3 Grand Tours. He could end up having a chance in one of the other tours. But if he wants to go to Tour de France, he'll be working. He'll be working for Bennett, Tour de France.
Yeah. Actually, I wrote down something yesterday. Where was that? Just so the numbers are right. Ineos, that's right. Yeah. So by the end of this Vuelta, Ineos or Sky, as it was, since the Tour de France 2012, which is the one that Bradley Wiggins won, this will be the 26th Grand Tour since then. So this excludes the Giro 2012, and it also excludes the first Vuelta, I think it was, that Froome won. But so since 2012 Tour de France, 26 Grand Tours, and Ineos have had 26 out of those 26, they've had 16 or 17, one of those, right? They've had 17 podiums. 17 out of 26 podiums. So sometimes they've been first and second in the tour, or one of the Grand Tours, or first and third, or something like that. But I've counted every one of those. But 17 times out of the 26 races, they've been on a podium with riders.
That's pretty good strike rate.
It's incredible. And think they have the focus for the early years was always just on the tour, and the other two were just secondary or third. And it's the last couple of years they've tried to sort of just win more things, but still the Tour de France is still their main focus, and yet 17 times they've had riders on podiums. It's incredible.
Stuart McIntosh wants to know, any recommendations for cycling movies or docos to watch, boys, apart from All for One, which is obviously the best going around? Yeah, that's why I had to read that one out.
Detour de France and Detour the movie.
Yeah, Detour 1 and 2. Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day.
The JB
actually.
bargain bin.
Yeah. Dan, have you seen, Johnny would have, but there's 2 that come to mind that were proper Hollywood movies in the 80s, and it was American Flyers and Breaking Away. So they were 2 movies, and both as corny as each other, although Breaking Away was actually it was actually a good Hollywood. Dennis Quaid, was in that movie. That was actually a pretty good story. Whereas American Flyers,
I thought Breaking Away was absolutely a brilliant movie. Both of them are corny if you're looking at it as a bike rider to watch the actual race sequences. But Breaking Away was actually a really good yarn about a college town and these kids who weren't the college kids, or the locals, and
they were the cutters.
Had a bit of a duel. Yeah, that's right. They were always having a duel. But this young kid, he just idolized the Italians. He used to speak Italian to his family. He studied it and all of that. And then finally, the Italians were coming to town, so we're going to get
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Don't give it the
away. I won't say anymore. But it is sensational.
Yeah, and it's got one of the best stunts. And you can tell that there's no CGI going on. It was a fantastic stunt in when the Italians did come to town. Yeah, that was a good movie. The Cutters were the quarry. It was a quarry town, and if you worked in a quarry, it meant you left school early and you were a cutter. And it was you had the prima donnas that went to college.
It was a college town as well. Yeah,
and American Flyers had Kevin Costner was in it.
Yes. Yeah. That was.
I'm watching a doco at the moment. It's on Binge. Which it's a HBO one. It's called McMillions, and it's about this scandal. It's bloody brilliant. Monopoly with Macca's.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear about any of this, Johnny?
No.
There was someone tipped off the FBI and said, I just need to give you a couple of names. Uncle Frank, or whatever his name was, is the mastermind, and he's been rigging this Monopoly game for the last 10 years. I'll just leave it at that. Boom, hangs up. And they're like, okay, better look into this. This guy had been grabbing the $1 million tickets and then passing them around to different people and names for like 10 years. So it's a series about how he got away with it. So these people were going in and saying, like he'd say, all right, he'd pick you, and then say, it's like mafia dude. If you want the $1 million, then you're going to have to give me half. And they don't obviously give you $1 million check. It's $50,000 every year for the next 20 years or whatever. But I'm only like 3 or 4 eps in. It's bloody brilliant. So Macca's Monopoly, you think you're in with a chance? You're not. It's rigged. It's fake news.
Well, it was then. Hey, the young fellow Will Barter that Did you see the Cycling News little story piece they did on him?
Nope.
So he was second in the time trial, missed the Vuelta stage, win in the time trial 2 days ago by 1 second.
1 second,
and the first thing was put to him is, do you how do you sleep at night now? If you've struggled since then, just thinking 1 more second you would have won. But he felt that he did his best everywhere through the circuit to try and to overcome that. So it was fair enough. But I didn't realise, but he was as a young kid, as a early, or he finished in his early teens. He was a cross country skier, and
another one.
So ski jumper in Roglic. This one's a former Nordic skier. He lives in Nice, but he's not too sure if he's going to go back to Nice after this because of the lockdown in France. But his girlfriend is from Oslo, Norway, and he goes in between Oslo and Nice. He might just go straight back to Oslo and then wait for the snow, and then just ski out the winter and do cross-country skiing as training.
Well, he mightn't have a contract for next year, the poor bugger, because he's CCC, which so the last I heard that he didn't have a deal. But I'll tell you what, he's got a bit of power there. That was an impressive ride on a really tough course. So a bit of everything there. But evidently his time trialling Pelmars have been very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of teams he said that are looking at him, but and maybe that time trial's enough to get him a deal. We'll wait and see.
Couple other
Sunday in Hell, absolutely brilliant,
really good. And then Numbnuts says, "What about the classic BMX Bandits?" That is a good one. Nicole Kidman.
Nicole Kidman.
Well, there's one called the 6-Day Bike Rider or 6-Day Rider with a comedian called Joe E. Brown. It is absolutely hilarious. Actually made in about, I think, the late 30s or something like that, around 1940. I watched it years ago. I would
Did you
love
watch
to
it at the
get a
cinemas,
copy of it.
John?
Yeah, I watched it at the cinemas. Yeah, throwing the Smarties or the Jaffas down the aisle.
The theatre.
All that. Yeah.
Was Gene Kelly in that? Was someone like that, like one of those big stars from back in the day?
Well, Joey Brown was the big star who started in, and he used to have a great big mouth. He's a bit of a comedian, and it was because 6-day racing was huge in America through the 20s into the early 30s. So this was just sort of winding down, but it had been a sport that matched anything. Like there is some challenge as to if it was actually the first professional sport, even before baseball. So that's how big it was. And very mafia involved, evidently. A lot of money came through the mafia. But there were tracks popped up all over America. It was amazing. And this is worth watching. I'd love to get a copy.
I had a copy.
YouTube.
I had a copy of that. I think John Green gave it to me from the Mayo Jean Club years ago. And I don't know where it is. I think I lent it. Actually, I know where it is. Mark O'Brien, if you're watching this. Mark,
if you're listening, your ears are burning. Come on, mate.
Yeah,
we
I
need
reckon I lent it to him.
Be shared around.
Got it back.
All right.
There's a whole other world, Dan. There's a whole other world in terms of the 6-day scene that so many people don't know about because it is from a forgotten era. But I've read stories of you had the New York 6-day organisers, which was Madison Square Garden, where the Madison event comes from, the name of the Madison, from Madison Square Garden, where the track was. And that promoter, he ran a series of 6 days in New York. Then you had another promoter in Chicago. And it was front page news, national news in America, if a rider that was contracted to New York actually jumped ship and defected and started riding for the promoter in Chicago. That was front page news. It was such a big story.
And they were millionaires. The Aussies who rode the racing, the guys that, like Gwenda's great-grandfather and Cecil Walker, the bike shop there, and there was a whole stack of those Aussies back then. And the equivalent of multi-millionaires when they retired. That's how much money they made.
Wrong era, Scooter.
And even like track cycling in Europe, these guys never went over and raced the worlds or anything because it was just not worth it. They weren't making much money in Europe. They were making huge money.
Couple other good. Paul Kelcher says the program was a good movie and Icarus as well. That Icarus doco is unbelievable, eh? Like when that guy. What about that scene when he's talking to the Olympic Committee and he's detailing exactly what they did, and their faces are just like.
What? When I started watching that, because it starts off with the movie producer that's behind it all, basically saying that he's going to train up and take EPO to get ready for this Gran Fondo event. And I thought to
See
myself,
what it really does. Yeah.
and I thought to myself, could I be bothered? Watching this wanker trying to be, a half-assed,
Yeah, I thought the
bike
same
rider.
at the start. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden
He just
the
lucked
whole thing
out,
opens
mate.
up.
He lucked out big time.
That guy, how that guy, particularly coming from Russia, when it's like, man, Putin, he doesn't just slap you on the wrist. Like,
No.
he kills guys.
Yeah.
Cuts it
And
off.
he's still in hiding somewhere. He's still in hiding somewhere in America now. He still can't, ever go back.
That was
No.
the program. The program. It annoyed me a little bit in that there's and it all comes down to TV rights and what you can and broadcast rights and stuff. But they didn't use any race footage, so obviously they weren't allowed to. And you've got all these years of Lance racing the Tour, and unfortunately, there's a race about Lance that had to be sort of manufactured away from it. And because we were there, because we saw it, we know what was happening, in terms of the racing situation. For me, it took a little bit away from the action of it. So it's the same with Graham O'Bree's another good one. So it's called the Flying Scotsman. So it's a movie on the trailblazer Graham O'Bree. And the same thing, he was at war with, or the UCI were at war with him to try and keep banning his super fast positions he used to come up with. So they couldn't get permission to use any of the World Championships race footage.
Is that you, John?
Just grab that,
No.
John.
Yeah.
So therefore they weren't, they had him going to the World Championships and racing the Pursuit at the Worlds in '93, but they weren't using any of the race footage because they weren't getting permission to use that stuff. So it just takes a little bit away from it, unfortunately. But I understand why that is. But that's a good one, the Flying Scotsman. Check that out.
Yeah.
All right. Final predictions for the stage, boys. Who do you think is going to win?
I'm going to go with Michael Woods.
Yeah?
Really?
Yeah, well, he's in form. He'll be bloody pissed off that he stuffed it up yesterday. And I reckon he'll get in the break again. He's going well enough too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know, guys. I don't know. Alex Edmondson wasn't too far behind yesterday. He came in basically in that peloton group that was fairly well reduced. I don't know. Too hard to pick. Look, this is, as we were saying the other day about, these stages not really doing much for the overall, but we heard how hard yesterday was, just sort of draining for the riders. And this 230 Ks, haven't checked the weather yet, but this is another stage that'll be really draining for everybody.
It'll need to be a really a breakaway like yesterday. That type of power in there with a strong headwind.
All right, so the top guys in the market, Rui Costa, 950, Omar Fraley, 11, Aaron Burrow, 13. Oh, Magnus Cort Nielsen, 13. Yeah, it's Chook Lotto. You know what? Don't even have a bet. Just watch it. Don't bet.
Would
and we'll give you a guaranteed winner tomorrow night.
Well,
what's the next day? Have you got the
stage
Friday?
16 profile? No, I haven't. I can try and rig it up.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. I was just.
It's got a.
Mate, I'm a tech guru. Watch this.
John,
you keep talking, Scotty.
It has a Cat 1. Yeah, so it has a Cat 1 towards the end, but it's a fair way from the finish. So it's one of those things, they go into a small mountain range as they're getting a bit closer to Madrid.
Yeah.
And they've got 2 climbs in that mountain range. Then they descend out of it, and it's 40K or so from the Cat 1 into the finish line. So it's a Cat 1. It's hard enough to be decisive, but it's too far from the finish to really probably make a difference. And Jumbo Visma will just gather around Roglic. Yeah.
So do you want to look at the profile?
If you got it there, but if not, don't worry. Here we go. It's popping up.
And
is that it?
That's the profile at night.
Hey, what's happening here?
There's a Tour de France profile in there.
Hey, I'd have shared the wrong screen. Hey,
be careful when you do that. Be very careful.
Nah, don't worry about it.
No,
It's not working. All right. That was good chat. All right. Well, tomorrow night, Matt White is locked in. So maybe we do the report card after he's on the show. Yes. I know. Yeah. And then who else do you want to review?
Well, we'll
you know-
do a review of the World Tour teams. You've asked us to do that, so Scotty and I will get on to that. It's funny. I just the piece I wrote for the Addy for today was about the fact that we've got the 5 top riders are all from Slovenia. Where's he from? Ecuador. But there's not one in that for that top 5, or the 4 guys actually who are in contention. There's no 4 guys who can really win 3 minutes from one of the traditional cycling countries. There's no Spain, Belgium, Holland, Italy, France. No one there, and it's almost a changing of the guard. It was normally we had the Tour de France battled out with 2 Slovenians, the Giro battled out between a Brit and an Aussie, and now we've got the top 4 in the Vuelta from non-continental European countries. It just shows that things are changing. It never would have been the case just a handful of years ago.
I did it. There's the stage tomorrow.
There you go. Yeah, fair way to go. Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, strange to have the sprint so close to the end. That's a bit weird. After all the climbs, we got the sprint. That's just to piss Sam Bennett off. Not that he's worried about it.
All right, and we should try and get Adam Hansen as well, John. I'll leave that up to you. Yeah.
Okay, we'll make a concerted effort. Yep.
I did actually send Adam an email, but just snubbed me. He's in. Unfortunately, but look, so with the team review, Johnny, the last one that I saw or listened to was Robbie McEwen doing the reviews of the teams at the Tour de France, and no one's going to dispute Robbie's opinion on anything within cycling, so I won't do that. But one of the things that I took from it was how I guess his view was that he rated the teams at the Tour by what the teams were hoping to get out of the Tour before they went into it. So if you're a team, go on there to race for GC and you win, great. If you go for GC and your rider finishes 10th, then you score down the list. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, hang on. So and then if you went there just with the pure sprinter, so if you went there as Lotto, Soudal, then they still rated highly because Caleb won stages. And I thought to myself, is that the best way of doing it, or should you just look at it as the absolute number one thing about the Tour de France is winning the yellow jersey? That's the biggest category. Whether you win a stage or not doesn't matter. It's about winning the yellow. Then what's the next best thing? Is it then winning one of the jerseys, or is it winning a stage? You can sort of debate that. And the green jersey,
mate, it's all of those, isn't it? Well, but you know what, Scotty, I don't give a stuff what Robbie McEwen's idea of the best GC or the best World Tour is. You and I, it's what we think. So I know what I'm going to weigh it on. I'm going to weigh it on, how they performed in the race, how aggressive. To me, the standout Tour de France was somewhere. I just loved them the way they took the race on all the way. So, but I think we should judge right for the season. So it's from the funny old season we've had with the start, the stop, with the COVIDs, the monuments, and the Grand Tours. Let's just give them each team a.
Well, this will be interesting. So let's chat about this offline tomorrow, because a lot of people say, well, Wout van Aert was probably the standout rider of the season, but the biggest race that everybody focuses on, the Tour de France. So you'd have to say Tadej Pogačar, by that measure, is the best rider of the season. So we can have that debate.
We were doing a scorecard on the riders, mate. We were doing it on the teams.
Yeah, okay.
It's a scorecard on the teams.
I reckon split it. We've got 3 more days to go. I'd do is 6, 6, 6. So split into 6 teams.
And the other 4 we'll just leave out.
How many teams in World Tour? 22.
22.
Yeah. All right, it's time to
go. Well, 7, 7, and 8.
Yeah, that's it.
We're working out.
All right. Thanks for joining us again. Tune in tomorrow night, same time, for another episode of The Detour. See you then.